All right, so we are taking a look at a exegetical analysis or the exegesis of Matthew chapter 18, verse 15. And what we're examining today is just that one verse. Now, I do have an exposition up on here of an expositional sermon where I do label it going through verses 15 through 17, but really the focus is on verse 15. And so that's what we're going to take a look at here. And this, as in all these videos, is designed to just help you if you are a Bible teacher or a pastor or anyone else just kind of looking for some initial analysis in order to get you started in understanding what the text says, and hopefully some of my research and my preparation can inform your preparation. Then you can go from there. And in particular, if you don't have familiarity with the original languages, perhaps this can be helpful as well. So just working through it the way I work through it, and using that as the basis for the eventual exposition. They'll be heavily focused on the text, particularly on the original language text. But I will bring in some other factors as well that exegesis of both the New and Old Testaments, not just the Greek and the Hebrew exegesis, is also bringing in other information such as the context and the historical background, things like that. And so as that's relevant, I'll bring it into these videos. In this case, though, let's take a look at what the text says. So it says in verse 15, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens, you have gained a brother. So an important passage on how do we deal with conflict, and that was the theme of the message that I preached at our church. But if you consider the context, first of all, where are we? We're in Matthew 18. Well, it starts off with the disciples asking about who's the greatest, and Jesus makes some points, particularly using children, about true greatness has to deal more with humility than it has to do with what the world thinks about greatness. And he works through that. You can look at the context. I think it'll be helpful. And if you listen to the exposition, you'll get a little bit more of that. But the preceding passage to this is the parable of the lost sheep. And so what that's teaching us here is that Jesus is really concerned about bringing people back into the fold. And he's concerned about restoration. And if you see this word here, day, that's at least how I'll pronounce it. I know there's different ways of pronouncing things in the Greek, depending on the trend, whether you're using modern Greek or Koine Greek or different versions. But regardless, this word can be translated as but or now. I think some translations do bring it in as the word but. That wouldn't be my first choice because it's not actually the ESV doesn't even bother bringing in that terminology here because there isn't really a contrast. It's not a contrast between what he was talking about with the parable of the lost sheep. It's actually now might be a better way to render it. In fact, that's what if you look at the bottom there of the suggested gloss in that little bubble right at the bottom of the screen, now is the suggestion that Logos is making. And I'm looking at the Nestle Allen 20th edition, by the way, of my Greek text. There are other Greek texts available, but that tends to be what scholars would use. Anyway, so it's the word now, and I think that's indicating there's a transition here. It's bringing up another point that does flow from the parable of the lost sheep, but it's not a strong contrast. So the ESV didn't even bother bringing it in. I don't know if it's necessary to do so. But you do want to indicate that there is some connection between what Jesus is speaking about. And like I said, the background is helpful. And I brought that into my own sermon. But what about the rest of it? The Ian de Arimatese. And then there's this variant, which we'll talk about in a minute. But essentially, that's the beginning here. If your brother sins, this part over here corresponds with that, with the English terminology here. And what's setting up is a condition. Now, in verses 15 down through 17, you see a number of conditions, and they kind of are nested and connected to one another. We're only going to take a look at verse 15 that has two of them. In both of the cases, in verse 15 here, you see the Ian de, and then what follows from it, and then you see it down here as well. And so what that condition is called is a third class condition in the Greek. When you see this word here beginning with it, it's a slightly different construction in both cases, but third class conditions indicate that it's a high likelihood that what is proposed, so if something takes place, that the result will also take place. So it's not so much a hypothetical. It's not Jesus teaches in general terms in some cases, and elsewhere in the scripture you find that, but here it's almost as if this is being anticipated. What the result's almost anticipated. It's not guaranteed, but it's anticipated. So keep that in mind, and we'll come back to that as we examine some of these phrases in a little bit more detail. Just for your understanding and knowledge, and particularly if you have had Greek exegesis previously, if you want a reminder, we call this the protasis. That is the beginning part of the if statement, if your brother sins against you. And then what results from it is called the apodosis. So those are just the technical terms. I don't think that matters all that much. We can probably just think of it better as an if-then statement, particularly if you've ever done programming before, you'd have that understanding. So the if-then statement, if this, then what results from it. So we see that twice in here, as we've mentioned. And so you probably want to bring up, I don't want to go into detail that. You certainly don't want to use the technical language. At least that's not my recommendation. But you do want to bring up that there are some conditions here, and that then this is kind of a process that flows, even though, as I brought up in my exposition, there's a wider context. It's not like Jesus is mechanically telling us to do something like we're in a business meeting or in a programmer's meeting or something like that. But there is a statement, and then there's something that follows it in what we consider an if-then conditional statement. So one thing I want to bring your attention to, so we did mention the conditional statement, but it's sort of broken up, right? In the ESV and the King James and New King James, you're going to get this full statement as the beginning part of the if statement. If your brother sins against you. But if you notice here, we've got some brackets, and we've got a little box that's going to bring up the textual apparatus, if you remember this at all. If you've taken Greek exegesis, that included looking at textual critical issues. This might come to mind. I did this just in the paper version, and I think the actual physical copy of the Nestle-Aland when I was in seminary. And I think the professor just wanted to get us used to that. But when you have Logos, you can just hover over it. If you don't know how to read it, though, you probably doesn't make a lot of sense to you. Essentially, what that box is telling you is that this is omitted. So it's in brackets, and then there's that little square box. It's telling you it's omitted in certain manuscripts. Now, if you look at the manuscripts, I don't think I can move my cursor over. It's going to disappear. So you're just going to have to follow my what I'm saying. But if you see the big 15, and that, which is the verse number, and then you see the box, you see the first two letters are Aleph in Hebrew, and then the beta for the Greek, or the B, I guess, for English. I think that's how it's referred to mostly, Codex Aleph and Codex B. Forgive me for that mistake there. And those are two major manuscripts. Now, I won't go into all the details about that. You can look up more about textual criticism. If you're taking classes, you're probably fairly familiar with what that means. But those are two big manuscripts that go way back in history, and they're pretty much full Bibles, essentially full New Testaments. For simplicity's sake, we'll put it that way. They do not have this phrase in there. So the NASB, if you have that open, the Legacy Standard Bible, or even the NIV, is not going to have this translation brought, or these phrases brought into the translation, I should say. So it ends, and if you have that open already, if your brother sins, you don't have the against you. So there is some considerable debate over this. Now, it's not just a question, if you're familiar with the King James issue and some of the passion that goes on with people who are very much inclined towards the King James version and the underlying Textus Receptus. It's not entirely focused on that, whereas just this was what later manuscripts said, and therefore we should just take what the earlier manuscripts said. You can come to that conclusion. There is strong, as we said, there's strong evidence that this is not part of the manuscript tradition. Those two big manuscripts, along with some other ones, omit it. But consider what Peter says later on down in verse 21, just to make it a little clear. We won't go into everything that I went into the exposition, but Peter comes up and he says, let's look at the English to the Lord. It says, how often will my brother sin? What? Against me. Against me. So you have the same phraseology over there. And that, as far as I understand, I don't see any textual variance there. So Peter understands this in some way being more personal. So there is some basis. Pardon me, let me get back to where we are. There is some basis for accepting this as maybe this is authentic. There's at least internal evidence that this was authentic, and maybe the majority perspective, the majority text perspective, at least, is correct. It should be in there, and somehow it was just not included in the earlier manuscripts. I don't want to delve too much into textual criticism there, only to bring that to your attention and something to think about and something in your research to work through. So how do you deal with that with your people? Well, obviously, my point here isn't to tell you how to pastor your church or to how you should format your sermons, but at least from my perspective, because you're probably going to have people with different translations in the audience, unless you're coming from maybe a strong King James position and you don't want to give any credence to the other perspective. But if that's not the case, and there is multiple translations in there, you probably do have to address it because the ESV, a modern translation, includes it, and the NASB, another modern translation that's well respected, and the LSB omit it. Now, I think the point is, if we look at what Peter says, well, there is a personalization, right? And that's the issue, right? Is it if your brother sins in general? So if your brother, your brother's in some sort of likely large public sin, is that your role to come and confront him? Or is it only if it's against you? It has to be personal. It has to be a personal slight. And I think I won't go. You can look at my exposition if you want to get my thoughts in that in more detail. But my recommendation is just to try to deal with it. And I would say that it doesn't necessarily affect the application, because if your brother sins, well, it affects you, right? I mean, if it's a general sin in the assembly, and I think, as we'll get into it in a little bit, it's against the local assembly, or it taking place within the local assembly, then you have warrant, you have ground that's still affecting you, even if this I say this part is authentic. If it's not, however, well, even so, if your brother sins, it could be against you. And when it is against you, I think the pattern Jesus is showing us to have here, and you can look at other passages of scripture, is not to be backbiters, not to spread gossip, but no, to go to them directly about it. So I don't think it makes a huge difference, but I think it's something worth that you should point out, because people might be confused if their translation differs from the translation you are using. So, as we mentioned, it's this conditional statement here, whether or not it includes this or not. If your brother sins against you, what are you called to do? Well, there's two imperatives here, right? And Logos is really neat. And I'm not going to go into how to set this up. Maybe I'll do another video. But I really like this viewpoint. You may have to have the Max version, I don't know, of Logos for this to work. But it's really neat that it breaks down kind of the elements, so you're not just having big blobs of text. It's really I like to outline in general, and so having this done for me by Logos really saves me a ton of time. But anyway, what it's pointing out is that these are both commands, or at least the phrases are commands. So these are imperatives. They're in the imperative form. Recall that's a command form in Greek or any language really. And the first one is hupage. Probably forget my pronunciation. I never really learned to pronounce the Greek, just to read it, right? Maybe you have the same experience, and then elegazon. And so the first one is to go. I mean, it's pretty much brought into ESV pretty literally, but it's this command that you go. And the point I made is that you take the initiative, right? I think what this is indicating is it's a command. If this condition is met, if he sinned against you or sinned in general, and it requires a confrontation, then you need to start the process. And the command's pretty clear. It's go. So remember, Jonah is told to arise and go. That's in Hebrew, but it's a command, and Jesus is giving the command. So you need to go to the person. I would make that point. That's imperatival. This isn't an option. But then there's a second part of it, right? The second part is that you need to tell him your faults. Now, the gloss down there says reprove or correct. That's generally how it's used, at least by the ESV when I looked up to the word study. So the ESV brings in the tell. I think it goes beyond that. It's really to almost reveal, maybe that's not the best word, but to bring to light, to show different ways. And inherent in the idea of that is that you're bringing some reproof. Now, I think it's a light reproof, right? It's not, you're not starting a fight here, but it's more than just simply telling him. And I think the reason for that is that this is direct too. And if you look at the difference, you might be able to see the glosses or some of the details in the bottom in that bubble. I apologize if it's a little small, but this is a present active imperative. So hupage, and elegazon is an aorist active imperative. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that this word, probably the second word, elegazon, is kind of a point in time, if you remember that. Now, there's a lot. We can't be too dogmatic. Sometimes that's at least what I learned in my Greek classes, that the form always has to be static. But I think what it's indicating is that this is a point in time, that the aorist, at least in this way, seems to be used that way. And so it's not this ongoing grievance and gripe that you have with a person. It's a really specific thing you're bringing up to somebody. And what that protects against is that you're just getting more and more annoyed with somebody, and then you kind of have a confrontation with them based upon your general sentiment, rather than saying immediately, hey, there's an issue here. I have to go to the person. I have to go to them. I have to tell them specifically, or depict to them specifically what has taken place. And then the last part of this first conditional is it's between you and him, as you see in the English, you and him alone, pardon me. And you see that between you and he right here on the genitive, and then alone matching it. So you and he alone. And I think the English brings it out pretty clearly there. That's an important point. The key point is we don't want to have going around gossiping to people. We don't want to get other people involved. But grammatically, at least structurally, one thing to point out as well is that the manu, the idea of being alone, is at the end. And sometimes I get confused with Hebrew. Hebrew really, if they want to make an emphasis, that it moves a word to the front. In Greek, it actually could be the last word. So if it's the last word, it's kind of saying this is the last statement. I'm making it very clear here that the emphasis is on alone, and that's really something you want to bring out to your congregation, or at least I try to bring out to the congregation. It's alone. We're not going between you and him and five other guys, or everyone's overhearing. No, you guys are going alone. You're settling this yourself, not in the antagonistic way, but you're bringing this in a right way to that person alone. So that's the first conditional statement. And then the point I'd make about the second conditional statement in this verse here, it's once again starts off here. If he hears you, so this is third person. If he hears you, it's in the subjunctive sense. But if he hears you, well, what's going to happen? If he listens to you, it's going to mean that you have gained your brother. You have gained your brother. And that's this word here for akuse. It's just the word akeo, right? That we learned pretty early on in Greek. At least I did, as one of the vocab words to hear. It's not just the idea. I mean, literally, this is absolutely correct. If he listens to you, if he hears you, is absolutely correct. But the idea, the understanding, I think here, particularly being, I think the subjunctive form lends itself to this. If that's not 100% the best way to understand it, then forgive me. You can look in your Greek grammars and do some research, but at least that's the way I took it, and some of the research I had pointed to that. It's not just hearing, and the form may point to that in some way. It's not just hearing, but it's absorbing it, right? That's not just, it's not, I hear your words, I understand what you're saying, you're not mumbling or anything like that. It's not comprehension, it's really absorption. Yeah, wow, I understand that there's been an offense here, that's an issue that needs to be dealt with. And then what happens, if he responds, at least in a positive way, if he listens to you in this way, then you have gained your brother. And this is an idea, this is this word here, I actually Exegesis, so pardon me for the terrible pronunciation, but this word here has in it, it says to gain as the gloss, but inherent in it is kind of an economic or financial or transaction word. So it's the idea that almost like if you had a great financial gain, would be tantamount, would be similar to this. You're going to gain your brother. And of course, gain your brother is so much more important than anything you could gain financially or otherwise. So this is real. There's real merit. There's real gold here, essentially. That if he hears you, well, praise the Lord, he hears you and he's absorbed this. If he's listening to you and he's going to respond in the right way, which is inherent to that, then you have won a great transaction. You have settled a great transaction here. You've won back your brother, and now there's no other issues. You guys have made peace with each other. It's not going to affect the church. And this person's also been restored, right? If he sinned against you or sinned in general, now he's admitted it. He's going to deal with it in the right way. He's going to apologize or whatever else needs to be done to make amends if he's truly heard you. Then he's also going to be reconciled with God, which is the main point of the passage. So I think there's a lot in there. There's far more you can dig into it. I got about a 45, maybe 50-minute sermon out of it. Maybe I haven't actually preached the sermon itself. I've written it, and I'm prepared to preach it, so I don't know exactly how long it'll go in, but probably 40 at the minimum. May go up to 50 minutes out of this one verse. So there's obviously more than what I've examined here, but hopefully it gives you a good framework to build upon as you go. I pray verse by verse and phrase by phrase as the Lord allows you in your study and in your teaching, and pray that this may be helpful to anyone just trying to examine it, either learn the verse better or in preparation of preaching and teaching. And certainly if there's anything that I should be corrected on or anything you see that you'd like to point out that I missed, that's important in the analysis, feel free to point it out. Iron does sharpen iron. I'm just trying to work through this myself and share what research I had for my sermons, so that maybe it'll be a blessing to others, as I know pastors and teachers can be very busy, and we don't all have the same background in different areas of study, and we can all learn from each other. So pray the Lord blesses you, and may this be helpful. God bless. Bye.